Hello, welcome to my ramblings. This episode, update to my transfer to Atlantic Division and how I ended up in Navy Region South Texas. Oh, like I said in an earlier my ramblings, I was rated highly qualified for the position I applied for, and the BIA, paid all my moving expenses, moved me out there. Things were going pretty good. Um, there was another electrical engineer. I mean, there was several electrical engineers, at least three. But they were our manager, and then we had the electrical engineering group that sort of was branched off from, say, the shops and what have you. I got involved in a lot of projects. One project was foreman had come to me and said we're having problems with voltage in one of the trailer parks, and I think I mentioned something about, well, maybe we should set up a recorder and take some measurements. And so, well, we already did that. It'd be a bunch of rolls from the recording equipment, and so I sat about scrolling through and tabulating all the data and stuff, and um, eventually, when I got done, I tabulated it up. What I found was that one of the phase legs, it was a three-phase system feeding single-phase load. So each single-phase thing went to its own string of transformer banks. What we found is that there's just one leg that was way overloaded compared to the rest uh, of the phases and stuff. So I let the foreman know and was asking about, well, do we need to shut a breaker off in order to make the transfer? And I think actually the way this system was actually configured, they could throw a switch, and then because they had various termination pads where all these phase lengths were interconnected, so you threw a switch. A couple of people were out of power. They swapped over a couple of phases. Know, had gone through and I had said, okay, well, if we shift about here, then we'll have a more balanced situation, and you won't have um, a whole one string of people having severe voltage issues. And so that pretty much resolved it. And there was a lot of projects like that I worked on. Um, you might have to read the book. I don't know if they're kind of detailed, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to ramble about them in a 3 to 5, 10 minute segment. But we had one guy there. He was all right at first, but I don't know, for some reason, people started getting this notion that I was an NEC guy. Really highly qualified on, for the position, solving, this was a primary distribution problem. It wasn't switchgear. I was modeling the distribution system because the drawings weren't available. I was driving the trucks out, getting the configuration of how the line was distributed, and doing the necessary calculations. And interesting thing I came up with is after modeling the 800 lines of distribution with all the various different configurations, came up with a tabulation of standard impedances that we could use unless there was some real critical need to be a little more specific. But I can't even imagine what that would be. They were accurate enough. Um, but started getting things like, oh, they had me do a space thing. That was no big deal. I didn't want to do it, but I had to do it. So I filled out all the paperwork for getting more office space in our office. And I don't know, just for some reason, some people, I don't know where it came from, that I was an NEC guy. I Ben Charlie took that. Oops, didn't mean to mention the name, but too late. Yeah, he's for some reason he really started getting aggressive and sort of psychotic with me. It was okay. I could always just go to my office to avoid him. But then he eventually, we had a lot of turnover. He became my supervisor. He started saying, I don't know what the hell he thought, but he would have me go out and try to take measurements on batteries. And I don't know if he saw my resume as a Chinese menu. Let's pick out this, let's pick out that one. Really, it was worked on as part of a project. So I was modeling the distribution system. I had it all modeled up. I modeled the substations and did some short circuit current. At the same time, I was using the data to solve some voltage issues and problems, particularly since on long stretches we had you know, light load, and so you couldn't really do a three-phase calculation to account for what was happening because a lot of the current was returning back through the neutral. Um, so anyway, uh, this notion somehow just spread. I think some other guy was saying I was the AutoCAD engineer, and all these a couple of supervisors were trying to give me answer NEC stuff. Jesus, what the hell? Really, overall, I had a good working relationship with 90% of the people there. It's just I don't know for some reason, just a couple of rumors about NEC came through. Um, so supervisor started telling me, you can't work here anymore. You got to go work somewhere else. You're not going to practice engineering. Jesus, no, I'm not practicing engineering. I'm performing the duties as part of my civil service position. But I just, I was going to just bear it out and stay there. But finally, I just decided it wasn't worth it. So I applied for a job with Atlantic Division. It's not like I could just show up there and have a job. I had to apply for the job. I had to get selected for the job. And then they had to offer me the job. And lastly, I actually had to accept the job. A lot of people don't realize that. It's not a contract if somebody doesn't accept the contract. It's like, so anyway, I make the move out there. Um, and while I was doing the new hire, I told you about my Commodore story. Well, I get out there and I have this supervisor. And I don't know, everything's okay for 30, 60 days. And it just starts tearing into me about stuff. And I don't really know what. Just really badgering and haranguing me. And one day I heard her, I guess she didn't realize she was still within earshot. And she said to the engineer that sat on the other side, "Oh, I got him terrified now." I just ignored her from that point, and I began to wonder, Jesus, maybe private industry. All right, is private industry going to spend $50,000 or whatever it costs the government to move you just so they could have a new employee to badger in a ring? So I started looking for jobs in Europe and ended up getting selected for a job in Guantanamo Bay, and I actually accepted it. But it was a long process because they don't have very strong medical facilities there. They don't want people coming out there that might be susceptible to a heart attack. So I had to go schedule, um, exams and stuff and um, uh, satisfy uh, to their medical requirements that I wasn't susceptible to a heart attack or that, they weren't going to have to fly me back in an emergency because of a heart condition or something else similar. And so we were all set to move out there, begin doing, continuing my civil service career out in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. But then 9/11 happened. I still had the job. I could still transfer out there, but government pays your moving expenses, but you still have side bills and stuff that pile up. Really, I could not afford to maintain a household in Virginia, and at the same time, because I still had to pay my rent, utilities as a civil servant, out on a military base. My budget, I looked at my budget. There's just no way that I can afford to pay two rents, two mortgages, whatever. And so I had to decline the position, and I ended up accepting one out in South Texas. And that's a whole nother story. So, um, by the book. Thanks for tuning in.